All right. Good evening. The time is now 5 o'clock on May 15th of 2013, and it's time to call the Public Safety Committee meeting to order. Thank you all for attending. Councilmember Benson requested an excused absence. Councilmember Watson, do you have any objections to that?
No objections.
Hearing no objections, his absence is excused. The next item up is the agenda. Councilmember Watson, any concerns with the agenda?
I approve the agenda.
All right. Hearing no objection, the agenda is approved. Ms. Patterson, will you please note attendance for the record? Thank you. All right. At this time, we ask whether there are any members of the public who are here who would like to speak to an item that is not on the agenda. To the extent that members of the public would like to address an item that is on the agenda, we'd ask that you wait until that time. Are there any members of the public who'd like to speak to an item that is not on the agenda? No? Seeing none in the chamber, I will check online. And I'm seeing no members of the public online. So we move on to the next item of business, which is the approval of the April 17th, 2023 minutes. I'm assuming there's no public comment on this matter. Okay, thank you. Councilmember Watson, any questions or concerns regarding the minutes?
None here, thank you.
All right, hearing no objections, the minutes dated April 17th of 2023 are approved. The next item up is Agenda Bill 23-051. This is the permit parking ordinance. The agenda bill requests approval for an ordinance enacting a residential parking zone near the Panorama apartment complex. Captain Lynch.
Hello. Thank you for having me again. So the last time I was here speaking about the proposed residential parking permit program, we were left with about 8 different questions that council members had. And over the last few weeks, we've been tracking those answers down. I would like to go through those before we enter into any new questions or ideas that we might have about this program. Question number 1 was it possible to open parking on both sides of Elm Avenue? I made contact with Director Chambliss about that, and he provided a local streets code for the city that requires that you can fit 2 vehicles on 2 lanes traveling at opposite directions with the parking on either side. It's not going to be feasible with the 8 foot of street parking allowed on one side only there. It's just not going to fit into the present day code that we have for our streets. Developing language to allow for a public process when determining which neighborhoods qualify for a residential parking zone. And this was language that we came up with to address any future neighborhoods besides the one that we're dealing with right now. When word gets out that this program is in place, I would dare say that we're going to have at least 1 or 2 other neighborhoods that want to be a part of it. So I had to come up with some language and some rules to that, and I'll read those to you. How do residents apply to implement a residential parking permit program in their neighborhood? First, they would contact the Snoqualmie Police Department to determine whether the residential permit parking is feasible and applicable to the proposed neighborhood. That would be something that would fall onto my desk, where I would start looking into, is it a problem? How many 911 calls have we gone to there over a course of 1 or 2 years? And do they have a high parking generator, like the Frontier neighborhood does? After it is determined that residential permit parking is feasible, residents and the Snoqualmie Police Department define the boundaries of the proposed residential permit parking area. Residents acquire a residential permit parking program petition, which the Snoqualmie Police Department would have and create the form from the Snoqualmie Police Department and conduct a petition drive in the proposed area to acquire at least 2/3 support of the program from that neighborhood. They would submit the petition to the Snoqualmie Police Department, and the police department would then provide a presentation on the proposed residential parking area before the Snoqualmie Public Safety Committee. it would go through basically the same process from that point as we're doing right now. It would be up to you to determine if this was something that should go to the full council vote, if it was warranted. If approved by the Public Safety Committee, the Snoqualmie Police Department will prepare a resolution recommending the City Council establish the residential permit parking area. And after the adoption of the resolution by City Council, the City of Snoqualmie will install signs establishing a residential permit parking area. Question number 3 was decide on the number of permits allowed per household within the RPZ. And the number that we landed on that after great lengths of discussion and research with other cities that have this was that the total of 3 permits can be issued for each address in the parking permit area, where it appears the number of permits issued would exceed the number of legal on-street parking spaces. The total number of permits may be decreased at the discretion of the chief of police or his or her designee. That's proposed language that would still have to go through a legal review. That's just the idea that we're having right now. The removal of North Bend from the parking permit stickers, that was done, so it only says City of Snoqualmie parking permit. And then Officer Mandry came up with an actual reduction in the size of the stickers. We had it at 3 by 3, which is pretty big for somebody's window. We didn't feel like we needed a 3 by 3 sticker. We could live with a 2 by 2 and still see it, which would actually cut the cost of the 500 stickers that we would have to purchase from $430 to $355. So it's a little cheaper to go down by 1 square inch. The change the sunset clause to a review date after 2 years, that's also language that would have to be drawn up and placed into the proposed ordinance by legal. I do not have a problem with having it be a presentation to either the full council or to the Public Safety Committee, just give our view of how things have been going. Like I said, I don't think it will be 2 years before you hear back from us about this. It's probably going to need a little bit more work as we find unintended consequences down the road. So I would probably think that I'd be back before you before then to review it. Number 6 was to investigate the possible creation of an online visitor parking portal. Now, I spoke to 2 members of the IT department within the city. As it sits right now, the city does not have the capabilities to have their own online portal for this. It would have to be something where we reach out to a vendor and start paying for services to have people do that. And at the same time, it came up in our discussions that we would be concerned about the ease of printing these off, especially at the rate of free, because we're not charging, that they would be more likely to be abused, to be counterfeited, or to be used in a way that it wasn't intended. As far as we updated the actual hanging visitors parking pass to where it only says the City of Snoqualmie, and also has a like a watermark or hologram to know that it's actually one of ours, and they're numbered, so we would keep track of how many each resident receives and when. We clarified language on the signage to make it clear which residents are allowed to park in the RPZ by taking the word residents parking out. It just says permit parking only. Vehicles without valid permit parking will be towed at the vehicle owner's expense. We thought that cleared up the confusion on whether it was for which neighborhood or for which residents could use it. So that answered the 8 questions that I was left with from council in my prior presentation. Since then, I've made contact with the management several times at the Panorama Apartments. I was in hopes that I would have a letter from management. They have agreed to write one and explain their parking policies and provide a little bit more clarification on the number of units broken down on their property. But this meeting has come tonight without me hearing back from them to get that letter. They did provide the number of apartments that they have. They have 191 apartments, and they're anyone from 1 bedroom to 5 bedrooms. There's 313 total parking spaces, 12 of which are handicap spaces. And when I was there talking to them a couple of weeks ago, they told me that the 1 or 2 bedroom apartments only get 1 parking space assigned to that unit. If it's a husband and wife and they both work, they both have cars, one of them is forced out into the neighborhoods. If you are in a 3 or 4 or 5 bedroom apartment, you can get 2 parking spaces. So the math will never come out to where there's enough parking spaces for the amount of cars that are there. Additionally, we on May 11th sent out an invitation that the management at Panorama agreed to send out on an email blast to all of their residents. We wanted to hear from some of the residents there and invite them to this meeting. It reads, residents of the Panorama Apartments, you're invited to the Snoqualmie Public Safety Committee meeting. Please feel free to join our city council members as they have an open public discussion with the possibility of implementing a residential zone parking permit program in the area. And if you're unable to attend in person, please email any concerns with parking directed to myself. And it has the date and time and the location. I was able to hear from one of the residents via email, which I would like to read into the record. This was from Tara Burbank, who lives in an apartment there at the Panorama Apartments. I live in the Panorama Apartments just off of Jacobia. While this situation minimally impacts me, I wanted to provide my concerns over the changes of parking policy in the neighborhood adjacent to the apartments. I believe that the residents of the surrounding community have a justified request for parking changes. The number of cars that overflow from the Panorama Apartments is inconsiderate. I do, however, want to make clear that many of the residents here are not at fault. Based upon my ongoing interaction with the management, it is clear that despite receiving large financial and regulatory assistance to build these units, they have little regard for our community or any others that were impacted by their shoddy planning. This is not a one-off either. Their build designs also include no insulation or air units, despite being built the same year of a heat wave. They close down the pool when it is hot or after office hours. They have had vehicles of the elderly towed. This parking situation could have been resolved with slightly less profit. Instead, they push the burden onto the surrounding communities. I can only believe now that parents or small children and elderly will have to park down from the soccer fields and walk the blocks back in. In addition, this will become an even greater target of crime. While this situation is understandably now reached its apex, I hope that the city will consider those who will struggle with the additional parking restrictions. In addition, I also hope the city will hold the H&N Management Company accountable for any additional law enforcement needed to keep the parking area safe. I also encourage the city to make a complaint to the King County Government Accountability and Oversight Committee, who have an interest in these matters. Let me know if I can be of any further assistance. Best regards, Tara Burbank. So a couple other ideas were floated over the last 7 days. One of them to include the possibility of allowing a portion of the Panorama residents to participate in the permit parking zone. Possibly those with 1-bedroom units that would be allowed to park in the RPZ. We reached out to several residents that a few of them are in the room right now, and I would be interested in allowing them to express their thoughts on that idea. As a compromise, Officer Mandry came up with a great idea that if we have to allow this, that maybe only the parking spots across from the houses on Frontier be used as public parking other than residential permit parking. At least then some of the residents of the apartment complex would have a fighting chance to get a little bit closer. But it would take away from the total number of vehicles that could park in that area from the residents. So at this time, I probably would want to hear, you know, their thoughts and ideas on that, and then I can come back up and answer any further questions if you're okay with that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And at this time, we would open it up to the public to the extent that you'd like to come up and speak. If you'd like to come up, we typically do about 2 minutes each person, if you could come up and state your name. And that's basically to ensure that public safety has a chance to listen to all the folks, get in and out in time for the next meeting as well. So if anyone would like to come up and address it, please come on up. Just go ahead and start with your name.
My name is Hector Granda,
Okay.
and I live in 9404 Ash Avenue. And I've been living there since 2011. So I've been around the issue for a while. And I fully endorse the note that you read, the email, because I think it was spot on many topics.
Okay.
Something that I learned as soon as we start to see cars parked in our streets is that when I asked the Panorama office how they were assigning the parking slots at the beginning, the lady mentioned to me that for the 2 bedrooms, one is free, but she was talking that they can rent another parking space inside. That was years ago. I don't know if that's the process.
Can you
Because
please
if
talk into
that
the
is
mic?
Oh,
Thank you.
that if you could speak into the microphone, that way.
If that is still the process, it's a problem, because clearly you will look for a free parking space outside instead than inside. So I think we need to understand exactly how they offer the parking spaces inside, because that can affect the solution. Even the prices of the parking permits, because if the prices are cheaper than the rentals, we are going to have more cars outside than inside than the one we have today. So that will be one topic. The other topic is that just by the design, Frontier and Ash, if you turn right on Ash, you cannot see the cars coming with the cars that are parked right there. And that potentially is a risk for the cars coming in and out there. So if you put cars on that side of Ash Avenue, in spite that it's in front of a green area, the cars are blocking completely the cars coming down.
Okay.
That's
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak?
Craig Phelan, live up in the corner of Frontier. I think the email that the officer read was kind of, dead on. It's not Panorama's, the tenants' issues, it's the management issues. We have to deal with the problems. I think giving them any type of permits to still park on the street doesn't resolve the issue. I mean, there's still quite a few houses. I have kids. A lot of the other residents have kids, so we got cars. I really think just putting in an actual permit just for the residents would be the ideal situation. That's it.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? No? Okay. In that case, let me go ahead and look online and see if we have anyone else attending. There is no one else attending at this point. Captain Lynch?
So I never knew that this would be such a quagmire of ideas and concerns. And because to me, on the surface, it's just parking spots. Well, it is very in-depth and a lot of things need to be considered. I think that we are supportive of the people on Frontier to have it be a residential parking zone that is only for the residents in that area. But having to balance the concerns of the, the people that live in Panorama as well. I don't know if there's an easy solution to this. I would be open for any questions or any further investigation into this that I can do. I do anticipate having a letter written up for council probably sometime this week from the management of the apartments, and maybe we can better understand the policies and how they do their parking there. I'm not sure if it will ultimately sway either way, but I do believe we would have that voice coming within the next few days. Like I said, I hope that it had been here today, but it was not. So
Thank you.
that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, I just want to thank Captain Lynch and Officer Mandre on all of the time and effort and energy I know that you guys have spent on this. It is a complicated kind of puzzle to sort out, and I'm absolutely sympathetic to having parking issues. It's really frustrating. I've been there, I've felt it, and it's a daily issue, and I certainly understand that. We do need to get it addressed, because clearly it's impacting residents. I appreciate you guys coming and speaking this evening, as well as at the last one too. My biggest concern is just making sure that to the extent that we go forward with this, that it's done fairly. Because just like you guys are struggling with parking, it sounds like the residents at Panorama may be as well. And I just want to, it would be helpful for me to understand how they're doing it, because it would affect my reasoning if there just physically aren't any parking spots left to get, as opposed to whether it's being parceled out by cost, right? And it is difficult to address this issue when there are so many apartment units and only so many parking spots. Councilmember Watson, would you like to speak on the issue?
Yes, I would. Let me lower my hand. Thank you. First of all, I want to thank the residents that have come out to express their concerns and support. Those things are all very valid, and we appreciate hearing directly from your perspective as well. I also want to thank Captain Lynch and Officer Mandre, as well as Chair Christensen did. There's a few things that I'm just kind of pondering. I guess, first of all, I'm thinking of my own situation. I have 2 kids, 2 drivers, so I've got 4 cars. And not knowing that neighborhood well, if I assume that each house has a garage that you can fit at least 1 car in, so maybe that stands to reason to have a 3-car limit, as long as we're going back and forth and making sure that we have a way of identifying that car is registered at that address. The second thing is, my concern is, once we address one neighborhood, how much of this is going to push into a neighboring area, and how we're going to make sure that we don't fix one problem to cause another, as to the extent that we can avoid it. The third thing is exploring whether we can expand that parking area to include Jeannie Hansen Park, so that some of those spots, when things are not happening there, that they can be used by the residents, especially those in proximity to it. And then the fourth item that I have, and that's, what defines temporary? If somebody's coming over for an evening, do they really need to have a temporary parking pass? Or are we going to say it's going to be anybody staying longer than 48 hours or 72 hours? Are those the people that require a pass? I guess I need to feel a little bit more comfortable in how that's going to be managed. And once you have a temporary pass, do you turn it back in after a certain period of time? And I don't know. otherwise, I think that we're headed in the right direction, but I'd like to have more time and input on this before I'm really comfortable in making this happen. And that's probably not the thing that, you know, if you live in the neighborhood and you've been dealing with this problem, that you necessarily want to hear. But I also want to make sure that it's fair and equitable to everyone. And obviously, there's some, you know, growing some concerns with the residents at Panorama because they're impacted as well. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm kind of at that neutral zone, if you will.
Captain Lynch?
Yeah, I would like to speak to one of those points about the visitor's parking pass. With this being a enforceable code, it will give the ability for a patrol officer to drive up and down those roads and look for stickers. And when there's not one, that will trigger a contact with that vehicle, trying to figure out where the owners are. You know, what I anticipate would be the same response that we're doing now to 911 calls for parking. We go the extra mile to try to locate before we ticket, before we impound. We would still have the 24-hour parking ordinance in effect, which I would venture to say that we would have to exhaust that 24 hours prior to removal of a vehicle inside, unless we make it to where there is the 24-hour requirement is not expected within the RPZ. That's something that we're going to have to come to an agreement on. I would think that having a residence have 2 temporary parking spots, the passes for the visitors, and having that be their property assigned to them by number, it would be their responsibility to give it to somebody that comes over to their residence, to where once you get out of the car, you're not in violation of this new ordinance. And then when that person is ready to go, they should most definitely take their property back and hold on to those for future use. I would think that having 2 of them given to each residence, we budgeted for that as far as the amount of that we would order for this particular residential parking zone. But as soon as they get out of the vehicle, if they do not have a sticker or that visitor's parking thing hanging in their window, they're going to be in violation of an actual city ordinance. So that's, I hope that answered your question a little bit to, you know, how we envision the visitors parking permits going.
Captain Lynch, I did have a couple of questions on how the actual enforcement would work. Because I looked at the proposed ordinance and then I looked on line at, what is it? SMC 10.08.050. And that was speaking mostly to prohibited locations. Then I looked down to violations. So to the extent that someone parked in the RPZ zone, what would the ticket be?
It would most likely be done as I believe it's a $40 violation through state law, through RCW,
Okay.
for parking in violation of a posted parking zone. So I don't think we need to address unless we wanted to make it some outrageous amount of money, which I don't think we do. I think going with the RCW would be the easiest and the cleanest way to do it. Did that answer?
It does. So at that point then, to the extent that, let's say that there's a car in the RPZ zone, right? It's been ticketed. I assume that there would be reaching out to whoever the owner of the car is at that point, correct?
Yes.
And then would it be a certain amount of time that it would be towed after that? Or would it be like immediately?
No, so what we've been doing, and I don't anticipate changing the way that we are doing business for parking. My guys are stretched thin as it is, and they don't go out looking for parking violations for one. We only respond to calls for service right now for parking. And we have several areas that we do get calls, not as much as the Frontier area, but there are some. but we don't go out looking to inflict any kind of monetary pain on people just because we see a car parked on, the wrong direction on a road. We view those as very minor infractions. And if somebody calls about a car that has been parked for a week, doesn't look like it belongs there, we go out and we do the same thing every time. We will tag it for 24 hours. We will do everything we can do to try to get in touch with the owner, not even ticketing at that point. And then if we make contact with an owner, we on a lot of times have worked with them to give them extra days to move it with no ticket. This is not something that we're using as a money revenue. We don't take pleasure in writing parking tickets. So we go out of the way to try to get a solution to it that isn't painful for the owner of the car.
The other question that I had was in terms of the cost to go ahead and obtain that permit. I know that you've parceled out the fees, the hard fees that would be included and required. Have you had a chance to look at how much it would cost in terms of manpower and time? Just to make sure that as we look at what we would need to charge for the fees, if we could to capture
If we
that.
were going to charge for the permits,
Would it work, for example, to be like less than $10 to get all of the hard fees and costs covered, as well as your time or whichever officers are doing this?
yeah, so I know that we have done a study within the city about hourly rates on how much a certain thing costs the city. And that's why I believe that the cost for having people at the police department take money, run credit cards or debit card payments for these things would outweigh the cost of the permit. The permit would be much less to make and hand out for free as it would be to have have somebody go through all of that. And we're planning on having a spreadsheet with addresses and how many of the stickers we give out. The stickers are numbered, so we can go back and we can look at a sticker and say that we can run it, and the officers out there will have access to that 24 hours a day. They can go, that this car belongs to this house. I would strongly suggest with just this first one, not charging a fee, and because it would be cleaner for the police department to handle. I've spoken to Deanna in particular, who's been here for a while and has done some of these studies, and it would be a lot to have to put onto our already stretched thin record specialists. That for people coming to the window, running, cards, it costs money to have that done. I would really push for a free for this, at least this first one, to see how it goes, and then come up with some sort of plan if we want to recoup some of that later on, for maybe future neighborhoods or something like that.
Councilmember Watson?
Thank you. So here's my next question. If I've got 2 permits and 2 temporary passes, what's going to prevent me from just giving those temporary passes to, 2 more drivers to use on a permanent basis?
That's a great question. I would dare say that some of the neighbors up there would notice, and their ability to call 911 has not been questioned through this. I would imagine somebody would say, hey, there's something fishy going with this vehicle. It always has the temporary, and then we could make contact with the owner of that temporary visitor's pass to see what was going on with it.
Okay. Would it be helpful to put something in the code that temporary pass can be used by one vehicle owner for a maximum of X days?
I would have to review what the, when I first came here last time, I had language written out that wasn't in the code, but it was the policies that I envision how we would administer that code. I can look back and see, but I do believe we've researched through several different cities where they do have language for that, about using those for a set amount of time.
Okay,
Yeah.
that would be helpful.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm warming to the idea.
So Captain Lynch, alternatively, what if we just did the placards? And instead of having a sticker and a placard system, that way, to the extent that someone has to do street parking or they have a child or they need to switch off, would that make it easier to run and therefore use less police time?
I'm trying to think about how I would feel about living there and having to have a cardboard placard hanging from my window all the time, or to remember to put it on each time that I got home. I don't think I would want to do that as a citizen, but it would make it easier, but I don't think it would be practical for those to have to do that. I may be wrong, and I may be something that I can warm to a little bit to think about it and to speak to them about. But just knowing how I feel about remembering when I go to the park and put on my, the park pass, I've forgotten twice and got tickets because I had the thing in the car, but I just forgot and I got out. I wouldn't want that to be a thing where people are forgetting and then we have cars that are parked there without anything. That's why the sticker to me for the permanent cars that were there was the easiest and most, it just would seem like it would flow a little easier.
I can understand that. Councilmember Watson, your hand is raised.
I love this idea because we could give 2 parking passes out, knowing that people have garages and maybe they'll clean out the garage to make a 3rd or 4th car fit in there. And we could register all the cars up to 4 for that house. And so if there's a question, you can match it with the license plate and prove that they forgot to put their placard on. And I think for a test case, then we don't have to worry about the stickers and they can manage it however they see fit. And then we can be flexible and come back in 6 months if it needs fine tuning.
So Councilmember Watton, would, just for clarification, because I'm taking some notes here to look into, would you envision it be to where we still give out 3 parking passes and 1 that for the visitors, so each house would get 4?
Each house would get 2 placards that they get to manage and register up to 4 vehicles, and they can manage that piece. I'm still not sure on the visitor pass. Maybe we do the visitor pass but there's got to be some parameters around that. The others are more permanent parking permits that they have that they can interchange between cars. I mean, if they have a guest that shows up, I guess the guest could use it, but it would be controlled by the residents rather than being heavily managed by the police department. It's an idea.
Yeah, no, I definitely. Right now, I don't think any idea is a bad idea to think about and to talk about. That one would be something that I would a little bit more time to envision and to come up with some language on how it would actually work, to balance it, to see if it would be something that that would solve the problem and not create any other that I can't think of while I'm standing up here. This parking problem has a lot of that, where I'll not think about it for a day and then I'll wake up thinking about, oh, I didn't think about this. So I would need a little bit of time to digest that one as well.
And Captain Lynch, one more thing. When we'd spoken earlier, we'd spoken about whether there were issues during the daytime or if it was primarily at night. Is there any more information on that?
I would probably defer to some of these guys. I have been driving that neighborhood about a week ago every day during the week. And there are plenty of parking spots during the daylight hours. And if I'm wrong, you guys could hop up and let me know. But I think it's more of an evening after work situation where it just fills up.
Okay. I've done a few drive-bys as well to try to gauge it.
You're
Yeah.
talking about Frontier only or?
No, this one would be Frontier, and then on Nye going up about a block and a half, and then on Ash going up a block and a half, and then all of Elm. Yeah,
Yeah, I think overnight and weekends.
overnight and weekends.
Overnight and weekends.
Yeah. Yeah, there were plenty of parking spots during the day, the times that I've been over there. Enough for big delivery trucks to pull in the wrong direction and everything else, so.
Mayor?
So is there a limit at Jeannie Hansen Park? Can you park there anytime, or is there, does you have to be removed after dusk, or
I'm not sure.
is there any rules?
There's something I've heard talk that people would be able to park there, but I'm not sure under what authority that would be. That's something that I could look into with the parks and see. Or we can have him sneak up behind me and.
That facility is unlocked. Cars are currently parking there, but that would be part of the park that's closed after dusk. So it's probably not a practice that we want to encourage. Some of our parks actually have gates that the police department secure, and that park is actually one of the ones that does need gates. There's a lot of after hours activities by bad actors occurring at that facility. I myself cleaned up a whole bunch of whiskey bottles the other day when you saw me out there, so.
That's helpful to know then too. Councilmember Watson, I'm inclined to continue this to the next public safety meeting so that we can get some additional information from the residents, as well as this awaited letter from Panorama to help better understand the issues and what they're doing about it on their end. What are your thoughts?
I absolutely concur, and I appreciate everybody's input and the work of the police department on addressing this. And once we come to a solution, I think we'll have a better sense that we're doing the right thing for the right reasons.
All right.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mayor? Oh, yeah. Officer Mandray?
I just had one, if it eases the council's, Officer Mandry, Snoqualmie Police Department, if it eases the council's mind, when they talked about the monetary impact, since I was hired and since the chief assigned me this project, and since I've been working with the residents, we're talking over 1.5 years now of working on this, and I have not written one citation. It has all been working with them, with the Panorama people or with people to move their vehicle, giving them the time that they needed if there was a hardship, and correcting the problem. But I have never written a citation if the concern is that there's going to be so much hardship put on this. Not to say that we wouldn't need to enforce it with citations, but it's not my first priority.
Thank you. And Officer Mandry, I know that you go like above and beyond in order to reach out to folks. That's definitely not a criticism at all.
Oh,
So
no, absolutely.
just so you know, you've been fantastic. So thank you. Okay. With that, I believe that is the last item that is on the agenda. Since we have no additional new business at this time, although I think we'll be talking about Blake in a couple weeks, hopefully. Unless there's anything else that either of the chiefs would like to address, or Captain Bailey? No?
I received a copy of what the proposed Blake bill is today, and I'm
Okay.
reviewing it right now. As we know, they're going to special session tomorrow at 10. So I'll have more information, at least for council and the mayor tomorrow.
Perfect. Thank you, Chief. All right. Unless there's anything else. Councilmember Watson?
I think it's a good evening, and thanks for everybody participating tonight.
All right, thanks. With that, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.